Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're going to get... I forgot my own intro. Yay. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy. So look at my 2020 reads. All of them. So this is a video that I do every single year, and I honestly love doing it. It's just taking a second to look back at the books that I read the previous year, looking at some stats and looking at kind of what my reading did, and then just taking a quick look at all of the books. So strap in, because we have a lot of books to talk about. This was my biggest reading year probably ever, but definitely on this channel, so we have quite a lot to get through. So let's get right into the stats. So I have a mixture of stats from both Goodreads as well as the compile system that I use that was created by G over at Book Roast. She has redone the compile system, or at least not the system, but like the entire spreadsheet. It's amazing. I'm very excited for the 2021 spreadsheet, but this will be a mixture of Goodreads and that. But let's just start off with the Goodreads. So according to Goodreads, which is actually one book off, and I have no idea why, I think I didn't count one of my DNFs. That might be what's happening here. But according to Goodreads, I read 153 books, but I actually read 154 books. So it's a little bit off. That is across 48,928 pages. That's a lot of pages. That's a lot of pages. And then if I look at like the shortest versus longest book, the shortest book that I read was a whole 28 pages, and that was the Northanger Abbey graphic novel. And the longest book that I read was 850 pages, and that was the first book in the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, which is a thick book, so not really surprised there. Average length of my book was about 319 according to Goodreads. I would say it's probably between 3 and 350. That seems pretty accurate. I read kind of smaller books to middle of the road books. I don't read a lot of big books is what I'm saying. And as far as the popularity goes, my most popular book that I read was The Hobbit, which over 4 million people have read. Not really that surprising. But the least popular book that I read was actually a graphic novel that only about 23 people on Goodreads have read, and it's not great, so would not recommend. And then my average rating was about 4.1, which is the same from last year, actually. I'm a big 4-star giver. Like, that's the general number that I usually give as far as ratings go. So that seems appropriate. All right, now breaking down my stats just a little bit more, we have the books that I read every single month, which was a lot. I don't know what happened to me in 2020. I don't know if like not really having a job for the first more than half of the year helped this at all, but like my worst month as far as reading goes was actually December, and I read 8 books, which is a really good amount of books, so take that with a grain of salt. But as far as like my best months, my highest reading months were a tie between May and November, because I read a whole 16 books that month, or each of those months, which is a crazy amount of books. I don't know what happened to me. I broke. That's the only thing I can explain this with, is I just straight up broke, and I didn't stop reading. And then as far as like the thickness and the page amount of the month is the total reverse. The highest page count month was actually September, which is about 6,000 pages, I want to say. Yeah, I feel like I remember it being like just under 6,000. So even though I read more books in May and November, they were lower count page-wise, so I must have read like a lot of graphic novels, mangas, smaller books, that kind of thing. And then as far as like how I read and kind of the categories that I read, my highest formatted category was actually audiobooks, which was 48%, which does not surprise me. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. However, I definitely expected this number to be much, much higher, because I definitely thought that I read or listened to a lot more audiobooks than I did anything else. So there's about 35% physical books and 16 ebooks, which also surprises me because I don't usually read a lot of ebooks. So this year, I think it was just the year that I discovered NetGalley. I read a lot more ARCs. I'm trying to get into my Kindle some more because I have it and I love it, but I don't ever use it. So it's a mixture, but I definitely thought audiobooks were going to be much bigger than that. And then as far as age category goes, this is surprising as far as like my past goes. If I look at this year, it makes sense because the highest number was YA, which I kind of figured it would be with 39%. Grade and adult are actually tied for second, which is surprising. I definitely thought adult was going to be a little bit more than middle grade, but I'll take it. Looking at my genres that I read, this does not surprise me in the slightest. It's always fantasy and contemporary that are pretty high up. Those are the bigger chunks that I read. Fantasy is leading the pack with 35% of the books that I read last year being fantasy. Contemporary is 24%. But coming in third is actually nonfiction, which is great. I think the TPR jar definitely helped that because I went out of my way to purposely read a nonfiction or two every single month, which I'm hoping to bring into 2021. I love nonfiction. I want to like read the awesome books that I have and that I've been collecting. So that is at third place with about 9%. And then I read things like mystery graphic novels, historical fiction, romance, classic, and science fiction. That kind of stuff is layered in there. But look at my star ratings. Shockingly, can you hear the sarcasm? Shockingly, the highest star rating that I gave out was 4 stars, with 53% of the books that I read getting 4 stars. That's my go-to number. I usually enjoy a lot of books that I read, and for me, 3 stars is still a good rating, but I still feel bad. Like, there still has to be something really wrong with the book in order for me to give it a 3-star rating. So a lot of things get 4 stars. Also, I know what I like, so most of the time I'm reading books that I know that I'm going to enjoy. So they get 4 stars for me. And then coming in the second place is 5-star reads with 24%, and then 3-star reads with 17%. So taking a look at kind of when the books were published, the ones that I read, we actually have a tie for first place between 2020 and 2019. So I actually ended up reading quite a few books that came out in 2020, which is awesome, both with 19%. And then as you can kind of see, this is there's a lot of years mixed in, but those two are kind of like number one, and then coming in at second place is 2018 books. So I definitely read a lot more newer books this past year. And then there's things from 17, 16, 15, 13. There's one from 2009, there's one from 2006. So it's spread out, but the bigger ones are from recently. So I read a lot of recently published things this year, or at least this past year. This is just a fun one to look at, which is the gender of the people that I read from. Not surprising to me, the biggest gender that I read from was female with 68%. I don't know what it is. I gravitate towards stories, and I honestly don't even remember who actually writes those books. It just so happened that a lot of them were female. And then we've got male, which was at 26%, and then we have at 5% non-binary. And then the very last stat that I want to look at is the authors of color, which is really sad to look at, but it's better than the year before, I know that for a fact. So 77% of the people that I read from were not authors of color, 22% were of authors, or yeah, POC authors of color. This isn't great. I think I definitely, in the second half of the year, did a lot better than the first half of the year. I'm definitely more aware of the authors that I'm reading from, so I'm hoping that 2021 will make this graph look a whole lot better than it currently does. So it's not a great number, but I wanted to put it in, hoping that that would help me notice and grow a little bit in the next upcoming year. Ooh, I need it. I need to. Alright, so let's get right into the books, all the books that I read in 2020. I'm just going to go through them really quickly, tell you the rating that I gave them, and if that rating has changed from when I originally told you and kind of after reflecting on it, if it's changed at all. A lot of these haven't, a couple of them have. So let's get into those. I started off the year with Legendary Ladies by Ann Shin, which I gave 3 stars. The Wide Window, the third in the series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this 3 stars. The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, and I gave this 4 stars. Somewhere Only We Know by Maureen Gu, and I gave this one 3 stars. Scent, the second in the Missing series by Margaret Patterson Haddix, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Gentleman's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee, and I gave this one 4 stars. Greek Legends and Stories by M.V. Seton Williams, and I gave this one 2 stars. A World Without Princes by Somen Chinani, the second in the School for Good and Evil, and I gave this one 5 stars. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and I gave this one 4 stars. of Curses and Kisses by Zendaya Menon, and I gave this one 5 stars. Jane of Austen by Hilary Manton Lodge, and I gave this one 3 stars. As Kismet Would Have It by Zendaya Menon, and I gave this one 4 stars. Love Lucy by Lucille Ball, and I gave this one 5 stars. The Language of Fire by Stephanie Hemphill, and I gave this one 4 stars. Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Antidote by Shelley Sakier, and I DNF'd this. Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman, and I gave this 4 stars. Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Gentleman's Guide to Getting Lucky by Mackenzie Lee, and I gave this one 3 stars. Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore, and I gave this 5 stars. That was a little wink, just because why not? The Lost Sisters by Holly Black, and I gave this 4 stars, but it's been moved down to 3. Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake, and I gave this 5 stars. Komi Can't Communicate Volume 1 by Tomi Hoda Oda, still don't know how to pronounce it, and I gave this 3 stars. London's Strangest Stories, specifically Historic Royal Places by Ian Sprague, which I gave 3 stars. Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, and I gave this 5 stars. Our Dining Table by Mita Ori, and I gave this 4 stars. I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, and I gave this 5 stars. The Miserable Mill by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White, and I gave this one 3 stars. Romeo and or Juliet by Ryan North, and I gave this one 4 stars. 1,000 Beginning and Endings by multiple authors, but edited by Ellen O and Elise Chapman, and I DNF'd this. The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafran, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Celloist of Sarajevo by Stephen Galloway, and I gave this 2.5 stars. And now I can unhaul it. Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, and I gave this 4 stars. The Austere Academy by Lemony Snicket, which I gave 4 stars. I Love You, subject to the following terms and conditions by Erin Lyon, and I gave this 4 stars. The Everlasting Rose by Danielle Clayton, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Sanditon and the Watsons by Jane Austen, and I gave this 5 stars. The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I gave this 2.5 stars. The Missing Manuscript of Jane Austen by Sari James, which I gave 5 stars. Paper Hearts by Meg Wibbett, and I gave this 4 stars. Unconditionally by Erin Lyon, which I gave 4 stars. The Last Ever After by Somena Chainani, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. The Beholder by Anna Bright, and I gave this 4 stars. Brightly Burning by Alexa Dawn, and I gave this 4 stars. Clockwork Angel, the first in the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare, and I gave this one 5 stars. The Tombs of ATUAN by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I gave this 4 stars. The Fortune Hunter by Daisy Goodwin, and I gave this 4 stars. Arusha and the End of Time by Roshani Chokshi, and I gave this 4 stars. The Ersatz Elevator by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this 4 stars. James and the Giant Peach by Roald Dahl, and I gave this 4 stars. Sabotage by Margaret Patterson Haddix, and I gave this 4 stars. Quests for Glory by Soman Chanani, and I gave this 5 stars. The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and I gave this one 4 stars. We're gonna hold this up because I don't feel like getting the other one. Prince Caspian, the fourth in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, and I gave this one 4 stars. Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, and I gave this one 4.5 stars. The Farthest Shore by Ursula K. Le Guin, and I gave this 2 stars. Stephen Fry's Victorian Secrets by Stephen Fry, and I gave this 5 stars. Henry VIII and His 6 Wives by Janet Hardy Gold, and I gave this one 3 stars. Ex Libris, The Confessions of a Common Reader by Anne Fadiman, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. The Plantagenets, The Kings That Made Britain by Derek Wilson, and I gave this 3 stars. Arusha and the Song of Death by Roshani Chokshi, and I gave this 4 stars. Pride by E.B. Zaboy, and I gave this 5 stars. Longborn by Joe Baker, and I gave this 4 stars. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Every Heart Adore by Shauna Maguire, and I gave this 4.5 stars. For Women Only by Shanti Feldman, and I gave this 2 stars. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave this 5 stars. The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, and I gave this 4.5 stars. A Song of Wraith and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown, and I gave this 4.5 stars. The Vile Village by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this 4 stars. Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare, and I gave this 5 stars. Moxie by Jennifer Matu, and I gave this one 5 stars. The Exit Strategy by Lainey Cameron, and I gave this 4 stars. Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I gave this 5 stars. The Tea Dragon Festival by Katie O'Neill, and I gave this 5 stars. Always and Never Yours by Austin Sigmund Broca and Emily Wibberley, and I gave this 3.5 stars. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I gave this 5 stars. The Tea Drayon Tapestry by Katie O'Neill, and I gave this one 5 stars. This Is What I Know About Art by Kimberly Drew, and I gave this 4 stars. Volume 1 of The Story of Lee by Sean Mitchell Wilson and Naomi Tamara, and I gave this one 2 stars. The Hostel Hospital by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this 4 stars. The Story of Lee Volume 2, and I gave this 2 stars. Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg, and I gave this 3 stars. Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire, and I gave this 4 stars. The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Once More Upon a Time by Roshani Chokshni, and I gave this 4 stars. Where I End and You Begin by Preston Norton, and I gave this one 4 stars. Invictus by Ryan Groudon, and I gave this 4 stars. Monstrous Volume 1 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, and I gave this one 4 stars. But I'm also unhauling it. The Epic Adventures of Lydia Bennett by Kate Rorick and Rachel Keeley, and I gave this one 5 stars. Where I End and You Begin by Caroline Kaufman, and I gave this one 4 stars. A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow, and I gave this 4 stars. Bull by David Elliott, and this got 3.5 stars. The Carnivorous Carnival by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this 4 stars. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, which I gave 3.5 stars. With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I gave this 4 stars. The Real Sherlock by Lucinda Huxley, and I gave this 4 stars. Roaring by Lindsay Dugat, which I gave 4 stars, but obviously has now been moved to 5. A Crystal of Time by Soman Chinani, and I gave this 5 stars. The Gallery by Laura Martz Fitzgerald, and I gave this 4 stars. The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafin, and I gave this 3.5 stars. Versailles, My Father's Palace by a ton of people that I cannot pronounce, and I gave this 3 stars. Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender, and I gave this 5 stars. Sleepin' Giants by Sylvain Nouvelle, and I gave this 5 stars. Who I Was With Her by Nita Tyndall, and I gave this 5 stars. The Slippery Slope by Lemony Snicket, and I gave this one 4 stars. The Truth Project by Dante Medema, and this got 4 stars. Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, and I gave this 5 stars. Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman, and I gave this 5 stars. The Book of Gutsy Women by Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, and I gave this one 4 stars. Time Sight by Lynn Johnell, which got 3.5 stars. Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, which got 5 stars. Wicked Girls by Stephanie Hemphill, and I gave this one 4 stars. Pumpkinheads by Rainbow.ROWELL and Faith Erin Hicks, and I gave this 4 stars. Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin, which I gave 4.5 stars. The Royal Queens by Nancy Goldstone, which got 5 stars. The Grim Grotto by Lemony Snicket, which got 4 stars. Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire, which got 4 stars. The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk, which I gave 4 stars. The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, which I gave 3 stars. Boundless by Anna Bright, which I gave 4 stars. Northanger Abbey, the graphic novel by Nancy Butler and Janet Lee, which I gave 3 stars. Witchy by Ariel Slamich Reeves, which I gave 3.5 stars. Ink by Alice Broadway, which I gave 4 stars. Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston, which I gave 4 stars. Monstrous Volume 2, which I gave 3 stars. Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Barron, and I gave this 4 stars. Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Yu, and I gave this one 4 stars. Green Glass House by Kate Milford, which I gave 4.5 stars. Peter and the Shadows Thieves by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson, which I gave 4 stars. The Magic Misfits by Neil Patrick Harris, which I gave 5 stars. The Cul-de-Sac War by Melissa Ferguson, which I gave 4 stars. Torn by Margaret Patterson Haddix, which I gave 4 stars. One True King by Soman Chinani, which I gave 4.5 stars. Sheets by Brenna Thumler, which I gave 5 stars. George by Alex Gino, which I gave 5 stars. Delicates by Brenna Thumler, which I gave 5 stars. The House with the Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson, which I gave 3.5 stars. The Penultimate Peril by Lemony Snicket, which I gave 4 stars. The Mistwick School of Music Craft by Jessica Corey, which I gave 4 stars. A Pinch of Magic by Michelle Harrison, which I gave 5 stars. The Private Life of Victoria by Alexander MacDonald, which I gave 5 stars. The Vanishing Trick by Jenny Spangler, which I gave 4.5 stars. Pride and Prejudice, the graphic novel by Nancy Butler and Hugo Petrus, which I gave 3 stars. American Royals by Catherine McGee, which I gave 5 stars. Caught by Margaret Patterson Haddix, which I gave 4.5 stars. The End by Lemony Snicket, which I gave 4.5 stars. The Racketeer by John Grisham, which I gave 4 stars. When God Winks at You by Squire Rushnell, which I gave 4 stars. In a Hollandaise by Christina Lauren, which I gave 5 stars. Royal Holiday by Jasmine Guillory, which I gave 4 stars. And finally, The Prince's Bride Part 1 by J.J. McAvoy, which I gave 4 stars. So that is a look at all of the books that I read in 2020. I apologize if the light has gone away because it's taken such a long time to film this and in so many different parts. I apologize, but I hope that you guys enjoyed. Please let me know down below what some of the books that you read in 2020 are, or if you just have read any of the books that I mentioned here, because I honestly forgot that some of these I read this year, especially the ones in like January and February. It's been so long since then, I've forgotten everything. But I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there if you want to follow along on any of those, and I will see you guys on my next video. Bye!